Welcome in, everyone. I'm Gerard Romalo, and this is The Vegas Verdict. Here we take a look at local and national issues of interest. We offer legal perspective whenever possible, and ultimately, we hand down a verdict. Today, we are talking about wrong-way drivers, and this may surprise you, but in the state of Nevada, it is considered a civil matter if you drive the wrong way. Today, we're going to be talking to one of the lawmakers who's hoping to introduce some legislation that makes it more of a criminal matter, in fact, makes it a misdemeanor. We'll be taking a look at all of that, and we have two special guests with us today. The lawmaker I mentioned is Brian Hibbetts. He represents District 13. Thank you, Brian, for being with us. District 13, by the way, up in the Centennial area, correct, which is growing by leaps and bounds, of course. And we also have Tony Abbatangelo. He is the former judge. He also goes by Tony the Tapper because he knows how to tap his way through the legal system. He's an expert, and we're glad to have both of you here. We're going to jump into this conversation in just a minute, but first, let's go ahead and take a look at this short video that kind of encapsulates what we have seen as of late with respect to wrong-way drivers.
He's going to kill somebody.
Multiple calls coming into Nevada State Police, all reporting a wrong-way driver before the deadly fiery crash by 215.
Driving crazy.
I understand. Northbound or southbound?
He's going east on 215. We're now just passing Reno 95 exit.
Bruises on his face and dressings on his arm.
And I believe they said 18% of my body was covered in second and third degree burns.
And you can see behind me one of the vehicles here. This is a 3-vehicle accident. You can see the SUV involved in the crash here. Just told by the Highway Patrol that there are 2 people deceased, both adult males, pronounced dead at the scene here.
Yeah, that particular incident happened back in June, but believe it or not, there have been more than 6 fatal crashes as a result of wrong-way drivers in Nevada just in the first half of this year. So this is something that I think deserves some discussion. And Brian, we'll start with you since you're introducing this legislation. And I should mention that it is currently in BDR status, correct? That's bill draft request status?
Correct.
Yeah. Tell me where we're at with it and why you introduced it.
Sure. Well, the history of it goes back a little bit further than what we just saw on the screen. However, I would like to point out that incident did occur in my district.
Yeah, right there at 215
and Jones
area. Yeah, terrible crash.
And that's not what we're talking about. Like Tony and I were talking about while the video was playing, that would be considered felony reckless, assuming that the at-fault driver was not under the influence. You'd still have felony reckless, so it would still be a crime. What brought this legislation up was December 9th of 2023. There was another wrong-way driving crash in my district, right around US 95 and the Elkhorn interchange. The wrong-way driver got on from the Mount Charleston exit. The very
edge of town, basically.
Yeah, very edge of town. Got on going southbound in the northbound lanes and traveled almost to Elkhorn before the crash occurred. And if you're familiar with that part of town, that is not a short distance.
Yeah.
And the crash killed the at-fault driver, killed another lady that was traveling northbound, and then ultimately killed a 3-year-old in a different car.
Yeah.
And the family of that 3-year-old reached out to me and said, hey, this is what happened. What can we do to help fix this? And I started looking into it, and I said, well, the first thing we need to do is make wrong-way driving a crime. Because in the 2021 session, it was made a civil matter, along with a whole host of other traffic-related offenses.
Yeah, and to back up a little bit, in Nevada, all traffic citations, running a red light, speeding, no insurance, technically were misdemeanors.
Correct.
Especially back in our day, because Brian and I have been around a while in Metro and the judgeship. Excuse me. And then, like you said, Brian said, they made certain ones, well, certain traffic violations, civil infractions, but they left other ones as criminal citations. So it's a cluster. So, for example, I got a few clients, they get cited at the same time. One goes to civil infraction court, we'll call it, and the other goes up to a criminal court. They're not together. It's a pain.
Yeah.
Plus, also, some of these crimes some of these charges, I should say, should still remain crimes. It's a very confusing situation. So I think the goal was to avoid warrants for people that are in minor violations, I guess, would be the way to describe it.
Yeah, I researched the committee hearings from the 2021 session, and the entire premise behind this matter was, do we really want someone that has a $195 ticket for running a red light spending 4 days in jail at $170 a day cost to the taxpayers, and that person then loses their job, loses their house, possibly loses their kids for a misdemeanor traffic bench warrant?
Right,
And that was
right.
the premise behind it.
Obviously, these but you pointed this out. Depending on the situation, it can all be compounded if there's an impairment involved, for example, or if someone is intentionally trying to either commit suicide or cause some kind of mayhem, then it's an obvious criminal matter, right?
I would agree, Brian. Like, for example, when that video was playing, we were whispering to each other, hey, isn't that a felony reckless driving? Am I missing something?
Yeah.
And so it just depends on the facts and circumstances.
Yeah.
So I get on drive the wrong way on a road and I catch it real quick, but an officer sees me and I get cited. Do I really need to be charged with a felony or a criminal violation versus somebody like Brian's mentioning that's driving for miles at a high rate of speed? And if they're under the influence, that becomes even more of a serious crime. Do we need that? Do we need to compare those two people? And they're really not, I would say. But why don't you run with it?
I agree. The current law says that if you're impaired, it's a crime. If the elements for reckless driving are there, it's a crime. Even misdemeanor reckless driving, that is still a crime. However, driving the wrong way without either of those two things is not a crime.
I guess that's where the confusion for me lies in, because isn't a civil infraction a crime against an individual as opposed to against the state?
Yes.
So who's the individual, and how it just doesn't make sense that we call it civil, I guess, to me.
I agree. Now, granted, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have all of the experience that Tony does because I've never been to law school. But from a common sense perspective, having especially something like wrong-way driving as a civil infraction doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think for many years, Arizona's had civil infractions. And the main goal is a good one, I think, which is if you don't pay your tickets, you have a bench warrant, where if it's not a civil infraction, you can go to jail. And you also, when you have a bench warrant on a traffic ticket, as well as a civil infraction, the Department of Motor Vehicles is notified. So your driver's license is suspended until you correct that situation. So there are other remedies. But there are certain circumstances that need, I think, that balance.
Yeah.
You need some people, $195 fine, you screwed up, you forgot about it. You don't need to go to jail for that. But the person that gets numerous infractions, is the term they're using, because you can't issue a warrant for a civil action. So that's the main goal, I think, of the minutes from the legislature was we don't want to have all these people going to jail for traffic tickets.
Correct.
Now, there's an obvious benefit to the individual, a benefit to the monetary part of this. But what about, if we change it to a misdemeanor, does that help the situation in terms of deterring this action of driving the wrong way? Is there anything that could be done legally, that would act as a deterrent?
Well, in my opinion, I think that the harsher the penalty, the more the deterrent. Now, at a certain point, you're going to have diminishing returns. But if people know that, hey, I can run a red light, and that's a civil infraction. Oh, no, it might hurt my credit. Oh, no, what else? What shall I do with my life?
Right.
Or I could go to jail because I did this. Which one of those is a more of a deterrent?
The person who already has the ruined credit and doesn't care about that, or the person who's looking at,
right,
a couple nights in jail? That's obviously going to be.
And then that comes into the next problem. So what Las Vegas Justice Court does is and I don't mean this in a big, large legal argument, but they arbitrarily set a bail schedule. So speaking of running a red light, that's $425 cash bail that you have to post if you want to fight the case. If you want to just pay the fine, because if you have not had a ticket within the last 3 years, you get the charge amended, and therefore you do not get points on your driver's license, and you don't get your insurance rates going up. So that's a fairly hefty fine, I think.
Yeah.
If you're making $10 an hour, that's a week's pay. Now, what you really said, Gerard, is really hit the nail on the head. You got bad credit. You don't even have a driver's license. What do you care if it's $425? Because you're never paying it.
Right,
So for
right.
people like ourselves that are like, oh my gosh, I got a traffic ticket, I better do something about it, and you go to court and you take care of it, it's really, the deterrent is already there because we have normal lives. I've always called them the big three.
Yeah.
The no driver's license or driving on a suspended license, no registration and no insurance.
Yeah.
And they get all three together because they can't afford to register their car, and they can't insure it, so that's why they don't register it, and then their license gets suspended. And it's just a revolving circle. And these people don't have mass transportation in Las Vegas, so what do? They just keep driving.
Yeah.
And they just keep getting fines racked up. Now, when that happens, I think personally, and this is as a defense attorney, I hate to say this,
You're
but
not saying it don't say it too loudly into the microphone, right?
eventually, enough is
Right.
enough. You and I are all paying our fines.
Right.
The people listening are paying their fines, right? What makes this person special? They have to go to jail.
Right.
And they're causing problems on the road.
I've got to believe that many of these incidents that we see that end up on the news, usually there's some kind of impairment or maybe some kind of mental issue going on there that would cause someone to do that. I actually have been on the freeway, ironically on the 215. I was going the other direction, but there was a wrong way driver speeding. And you talk about a scary moment.
Oh, yeah.
That will turn you white in a second. And I think what interests me about this story is I remember covering several of these as a reporter. We know it happens. The fact that we've had at least 6, maybe 7 or more fatals already this year because of wrong way drivers, it seems to me that something more should be done. And I'm wondering if this is a step in the right direction.
Well, the impairment is once again what we've talked about before the show started, which is that's a DUI.
Right.
Basically, with substantial bodily harm or death, it's a 2 to 20 year sentence, mandatory 2 years in prison, and when you kill people, people are going to prison for that.
Yeah.
I just had a guy in a bad car crash, without getting into all the details, and it was actually with some DA named Tracy Hibbetts.
Whoa, I've heard of her.
That guy. Yeah. No, but I mean,
Brian's wife,
we
by the
came up
way.
with what we thought was a fair, reasonable situation where nobody died. And like I said, I won't get into all the facts.
Yeah.
But there was guns and dope and impairment, and people seriously hurt, including the driver, my client.
Yeah.
And he's doing a 6 to 15 year sentence.
Yeah.
And we thought that was fair and reasonable. And believe me, the victims of the crime, and you hear it from back in your Metro days, as well as a representative of constituents, they don't think 6 to 15 is fair. They want blood.
Right.
They want life.
Yeah.
But there's a balance. What are we going to do with these people? It's a large picture.
There's a cost factor. There's a jail space factor. There's a lot to consider.
Correction officer factor. Brian mentioned, $170 a day to house them. There are a lot of factors here. But and eventually they're going to get out, and you're going to hopefully be back in society. And there are crimes like that that people do. They do get time.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Gentlemen, we've got a good start here. We're going to take a look at what are some other remedies that could possibly be considered in terms of stopping these wrong way drivers. What else could be done? And go ahead, Brian.
Well, one of the things that's being done currently is NDOT is installing wrong way driver detection systems on our freeway on-ramps or off-ramps.
I've heard a little bit about that, and we'll get to that on the backside of this break. We'll take a short break. We'll be back right after this.
Legal troubles require swift action, and there's only one attorney who's quick on his feet.
Legal troubles don't wait, and neither should you. I'm Tony Abbatangelo, a former judge with 30 years experience. I know the judicial system, and I know what will work for you in court.
When your circumstance requires a skilled negotiator who knows the law, tap into Tony. He's a former judge who can defend your rights. Call 707-7000.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Vegas Verdict. We're talking with state lawmaker Brian Hibbetts, District 13 State Assemblyman, and Tony Abbatangelo about wrong-way drivers. Interesting, we just learned that in certain instances, driving the wrong way is actually considered a civil matter. Brian has introduced some legislation that will hopefully get passed to make it a misdemeanor, but obviously, depending on the situation, these things can go on up to very serious criminal matters, felonies, in fact, that could result in jail time and major penalties. Brian, right before the break, you brought up the fact that NDOT has introduced, I believe it's some type of digital technology. It's a warning system if you happen to be driving the wrong way on the highway. Is that right?
Right. On the off-ramps, certain off-ramps, because they don't have the funding to do every single off-ramp right now. That's what we're hoping to get to at some point. The technology detects something moving the wrong way onto the off-ramp.
Right.
And alerts an operator who then looks at the video feed to determine whether it's an actual vehicle moving, if it's a pedestrian that's walking through, or if there's trash being blown around.
Right.
If it is a vehicle that's entering the freeway the wrong way, they can alert Highway Patrol, who then responds and attempts to stop that person.
Or shut down the freeway,
or
get traffic, out of the way so that nobody gets hurt.
Maybe you put an alert on the signs.
Yeah, and that's
now.
one of the things that they're looking at in my meetings with both the RTC and NDOT. That is one of the future solutions to put up on those digital billboards. Wrong way driver detected, use caution, something to that of that nature.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Gerard, it's very scary. Seeing somebody coming at you, that's going to put you. Some people are going to freeze. Some people are going to swerve. So to put people on notice or alert that something's coming their way, it's a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. I'd like to see more publicized about this, because I feel like oftentimes, and this is true for a lot of different types of crimes, we don't hear about it until it's on the news, but it seems to me something like this could be prevented, and maybe that the digital technology is part of the solution here. Any other thoughts from a legal perspective? I mean, do we need more deterrence legally, do you think?
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be introducing this bill.
Yeah. No.
And what is the bill really about? Why don't you explain that?
Sure. The bill basically, so according to NRS 41.015 for the legal nerds out there,
you can look it up.
Section 3, as used in this title, civil infraction means a violation of any provision, chapters 43 to 484E, inclusive 486 and 490 of NRS, that is not punishable as a misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, or felony. Now, in layman's terms, what that means is any traffic infraction that is not specifically labeled as a misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, or felony is a civil infraction. So if you look at the wrong way driving statute, which is 44B.227, driving on a divided highway, it doesn't mention misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, or felony. Therefore, it is a civil infraction.
I see.
And I have actually had our staff lawyers look at it to verify, yes, this in and of itself is a civil infraction.
Is that by oversight, or was that intentional?
That was... So in speaking with the original bill's sponsor, there were so many NRSs that were put into the bill that it would be impossible for anyone to go through and go, okay, yes, this one, no, not this one, yes, this one, not this one.
So it's kind of an assumed,
And when I brought it to her, her immediate reaction, I don't think that was part of it. So, well, let me look and make sure that it was.
Okay.
And it was. And so we've had some ongoing discussions about how to fix this one particular NRS. And that would be as simple as putting in at the end of the NRS, a violation of this NRS is a misdemeanor.
Right. The magic word is misdemeanor needs to be in the wrong way driving statute. Right. It doesn't have to be this overturning everything. But that civil infraction has, I would say, been messy. in the courts.
Okay.
Las Vegas Municipal Court does their thing. North Las Vegas Municipal Court does a different thing. Las Vegas Justice Court does something different.
Okay.
You got all these different judges making different decisions, and it's really random. That's one of my concerns.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, my other concern is when somebody gets 2 citations and one of the statutes happens to say the word misdemeanor, you're in front of a judge. And one time I did that, and I said, what about this other citation that was with it? And the judge and the DA goes, I'll dismiss it. You know, as part of a package deal, as we used to say back, we still say in the day.
Right, right.
You know, we're a global negotiation. Well, all of a sudden, I get a call from my client going, that's not what happened. My civil infraction is now in collections, which has also been reported to DMV. So then I got to get a motion down there, even though, and I get the minutes. And I mean,
and that ties up courts and, you know, delays things. And so the continuity factor is really the motivation behind this, I would think. One of the primary motivations.
It needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
So in stuff like that, that's fine. I mean, if you want to, that's the legislature's job.
Yeah.
You know, when I look at it, the legislature wants to make that a misdemeanor. That's it.
Yeah.
No
It
big
doesn't
deal.
change your job at all, right?
It just changes where I go.
Yeah.
So right now, when I go to whatever court it is, because under the statute, you have to post a cash bail in advance. Then you have a hearing before a hearing master, unless you have not had a ticket in the last 3 years, then it's amended automatically. Because these points, that's another reason why people want the tickets amended, is to avoid their insurance rates going up.
Yeah.
But under the statute, DMV still reports this stuff to, I'm sorry, the courts report this to DMV
equally,
and the insurance companies grab that information. So all the government agencies are doing the private bidding.
They're collecting points. It's an infraction, and you get enough of them, and you lose, basically.
And I get that. In Las Vegas Municipal Court used to be really good about this, where they go, Tony, your guys had 3-4 tickets in the last 2 years. They have the whole history.
Yeah.
I mean, but most courts don't do that. And I think that's kind of where Brian's coming from as a legislator, as a former Metro officer, is, look, we don't want these maniac drivers, you know, getting a slap on the wrist.
Right. Want to make sure there's a consequence. And
exactly. And there could be a legitimate reason for driving the wrong way. There could be. Your friend calls you and says, hey, my car broke down on the side of the freeway. It's right next to the off-ramp. The easiest way to get there is go down the wrong way. And one of the things that was put into the law was if a criminal or if a traffic offense is charged as criminal, the prosecuting attorney, whether it's the DA, the city attorney, whoever, has the option of reverting that to a civil matter if they deem it appropriate.
That makes sense. Brian, you obviously have the pulse of Carson City, I'm sure. Do you expect to have opposition? And we're going to give our own verdict on this in just a moment. But do you expect to get opposition to this? To me, this just all sounds like common sense.
Well, that's what I would think. However, I can tell you, and having served in a regular session and 2 special sessions, there's going to be opposition to everything. Somebody somewhere will have a problem with me doing this.
There will be an argument.
There will be an argument. Now, whether or not that actually, not that it doesn't matter, but whether or not that actually sways the body is another matter. I have yet to speak to one of my colleagues that has said absolutely not. We're not doing this.
This isn't a partisan issue. There isn't.
No, this is a public safety issue.
This is a public safety. There's money and continuity and common sense involved. You would think that reasonable people could sit down and, you know, hash something out relatively quickly.
You would think so.
Yeah.
We'll find out in a few months.
How fun. All right. Well, Tony, did you want to?
No, I'm just like, it's amazing because my wife, who's a human dentist, does volunteer work on exotic animals. And she's like tigers and lions. And, you know, one guy was arguing, I was watching this hearing, and this guy's like, you gonna prohibit me from owning a python? Next thing you know, I can't own a dog. And I'm just like, what? Nobody? No, that's not where this is going, buddy.
In other
this
cities,
is a misdemeanor. It's a traffic ticket that technically used to be a misdemeanor. Just put the magic word in there. Next case. let's move on.
Back
That's
when
why I look at it.
Back when I was a cop working the street, if I pulled you over for something, I could take you to jail for that.
Always all misdemeanors.
Right.
Everything was a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm trying to get back to that one NRS at a time. That's not what I'm doing. I'm addressing one problem with one NRS to try to put some teeth back into it.
Yeah, I like it. And on the teeth note, you mentioned lions and tigers. In any other city, that might sound crazy, but in Las Vegas, you know, I recall covering an escaped tiger story back in the day, and we've had some of those incidents as well. All right, we will take another break here shortly. We'll be right back, and we'll hand down our Vegas verdict on the subject of wrong-way drivers and this civil versus misdemeanor matter. We'll be right back after this.
If you've been injured in an accident, you don't have to go it alone. At Paul Paddle Law, we understand your injuries aren't just physical. They also bring financial burden and emotional strain. At our firm, it's not just about legal representation. It's about genuine care and commitment. Lock in the attention you deserve from your attorney. We'll get you on the path to recovery. Call Paul Paddle Law. Legal security when you need it.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Vegas Verdict, and today we are discussing wrong-way drivers. We have Brian Hibbetts with us. He's a state lawmaker, Assembly District 13, and he has introduced some legislation to change the wrong-way driver infraction from a civil matter, which is civil in certain circumstances, to a misdemeanor, making it a criminal infraction. We've been having a lively discussion about that. Brian, once again, get us up to speed on the statute that you're introducing and give us some final thoughts on why we need to pass this.
Yeah, well, the wrong-way driving statute is 44B.227, if anybody wants to read it. And it is currently a civil matter, and legislation would simply add the word, well, three words, is a misdemeanor.
Is a misdemeanor. Okay.
Which would revert it from civil back to criminal, which is where it was prior to the AB 116 in the 2021 session, which made a whole host of traffic offenses civil matters.
It sounds like the reason it was switched in the first place is just because there was maybe some confusion or just
there were so many
on.
that were put in that this one just happened to be lumped in with all the rest.
Gotcha. Tony, your final thoughts. You have to defend these guys if they're making this this crime. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the way I look at it is, once again, depends on facts and circumstances.
Yeah.
So somebody gets on the road, like I was saying, off camera, I'm on 4th Street. It's a one-way street. I see people once a month at least driving the wrong way. But they usually catch themselves, like as soon as they see a car coming at them, and they just pull over or they take a turn to get, on the correct.
And most
side
of us have done that, by the way.
Right,
if we're honest
sure.
with ourselves, we've made a mistake like that before, and you correct it right away.
And that should be a very minor situation.
Mm-hmm.
However, the best example is that video, and it's in Brian's constituents, having somebody driving down the 95 doing high rate of speed.
Yeah.
They're high or drunk.
Right.
Because
right.
that's the only way you don't keep passing cars, and you're just like, oh, what's going on here?
Right.
And that's very dangerous. And as of course, I want the best outcome for my clients, but I also am a member of this community, and I have family and friends that live here, and you have to have a safe driving. I mean, because you're driving a 200 or 2,000 pound car, you can kill somebody very easily.
All right, we've been having a healthy discussion about this. It is now time to hand down a verdict. And the way this works is I'll count down from 3, and we will say either yes or no. The question that we're posing today is, should driving the wrong way be considered a misdemeanor at the very least, or some other criminal infraction thereon, but no longer a civil matter as it is currently written in the law. So on 3, either a yes or no. 3, 2, 1. Yes. All right, so we're all with you. We are hoping, Brian, that this does, in fact, get passed, along with a lot of other good legislation as well. with that, we will wrap up this session of the Vegas Verdict. Thank you all for listening and or watching. For future interests, keep in mind that we are available on Amazon, on Apple Podcasts, I should say, Apple Podcasts, and what's the other one? Spotify. We're on Spotify as well. We have a YouTube channel. If you have any questions or you have a subject that you'd like to introduce that we could maybe pick up here, check us out on vegasverdict.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.